Johannesburg's Public Safety MMC Mgcinichwaku has confirmed to SABC News that Warwick Stock, better known as DJ Warras, had taken out at least 5 protection orders in the weeks before he was killed in that shooting in the Joburg CBD yesterday. At least 3 people have been identified as suspects. Police also in possession of video footage that apparently shows the attack. Let's get the view now of the CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations, Chad Thomas. Chad, good to have you on the SABC. I'll speak to you about the issue of hijacked buildings in the inner city in a moment, because that's one of the strands that have come out after news of the shooting. But first, the murder investigation itself and what we know about the circumstances of DJ Warras's killing. Is there anything from an investigation point of view that stands out for you at this stage?
Demakila, good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. It's still quite surreal that we're talking about a recent hit that's just taken place. Today I was at the funeral of Maurice van der Merwe, who was killed just over a week ago. Also somebody in the security industry, also somebody that was involved in crime fighting, was also a witness at the Madlanga Commission. Now we've got DJ Warras that's been assassinated. It's very concerning. All of these investigations, I believe, are being handled by the Provincial Serious and Violent Crimes Investigation Unit based out of Wynberg. They're a very astute unit. They're a unit that have capacity and resources to investigate these types of serious crimes. And they are following leads. I think it's important to understand that we're looking at hitmen that aren't exactly professional assassins like you would see in the movies. These are guys that left behind cartridges. These are guys that didn't care that there was CCTV footage, much the same as what we saw in the AKA killing, where there was clear footage of the people that were responsible for taking him out. So our only hope is that once they take down these particular suspects, that these suspects can lead them to the facilitators and lead them to the masterminds, if there are facilitators and masterminds.
What are the chances of that happening, though, tracking down whoever ordered the hit, if, as is now being suspected, the killing is linked to the hijacking of buildings in the inner city? What are the chances that 3 criminals would give up whoever paid them, if that's what happened, to do this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic we have in South Africa in the criminal justice system. You find the low-hanging fruit, you prosecute the low-hanging fruit like we saw in the Babita case, but there's various aspects as to why hitmen don't give up who the facilitators are and who the masterminds are. The first is the safety of their loved ones outside. The second is while they're in prison, they live it up. It's not like you and me that are very scared of the prison environment. To them, it's just another environment where they hold rank, they hold seniority because of the types of crimes that they've been involved in. Often, more often than not, their families are looked after while they're inside, and their families are also at threat. So it's a case of, well, we're going to look after your families. They're going to have food on their table. You keep quiet. If you say something, well, then we're not going to look after your family and your family's going to land up dead. So that's the dynamic we're faced with in South Africa, is it doesn't really help to offer immunity and indemnity. You need to follow the chain of evidence in terms of cell phone calls, cash transfers, EFTs, that type of thing, to try and find out who the facilitators were and who the masterminds were that ordered the hit.
Right, and some reporting that's being done by News 24 today, in fact, suggests that there may have been surveillance conducted by one of the accomplices of the triggerman. In this case, they are quoting people who claim to have seen a man in the vicinity of the Zambezi building where he was then shot not too long after that. But I want to ask you about what we're told Warwick Stock was doing in the inner city yesterday. He'd apparently gone in there on business with the owner of what is still or was a hijacked building, collection of rent, installation of biometric systems to keep people who aren't paying rent or paying perhaps to the hijackers, is what that installation of these biometric systems was meant to prevent, right? And then he is killed. How dangerous is it to be involved in that sort of business in the inner city, in the context of what we're now told is, in fact, a turf war between the hijackers of these buildings?
It's an extremely distressing situation. We did a walkabout in terms of hijacked buildings in Joburg CBD, as well as Joburg Park, Heilbrow, and Berea a few years ago with Angelique Serrao, who was the investigations editor at the Star newspaper. And believe it or not, while we were doing a walkabout in the old Moni's building across from F&B Bank City, there was a body. We came across a body. And it brought home the reality of just how dangerous these buildings are. These buildings are controlled by organized crime syndicates that are in cahoots with police officers. We've seen police officers from Joburg Central, as well as police officers from Hillbrow, who have been charged in the past for their involvement in protecting these organized crime syndicates. And there's big money to be made, because one flat that's got 4 bedrooms, that can hold up to maybe 15, 20, even upwards of that, people, each paying 2,000 to 3,000 rands rent. A lot of them are undocumented. A lot of them are just there looking for a roof over their head while they try to find work as migrants in Johannesburg and other CBDs. And it's become a major cause of concern, because it's obviously a huge money generating operation for these organized crime syndicates.
And on that, you've answered my next question slightly, but tell us more about the profile of the people who sit right at the top of these hijacking syndicates. Who are they? How dangerous are they? And how does the money, for example, that is often collected by runners from the quote-unquote tenants get to them without detection?
The demographics changed somewhat. When we looked at hijacked buildings in Hillbrow in the mid-90s to late 90s, it was foreign nationals. It was primarily Nigerians that had taken over buildings specifically for other criminal enterprises. They would have prostitution in those buildings. They would have drug dealings in those buildings. They would operate boiler rooms for 419 scams out of those buildings. And then local criminals cottoned on to the fact that there were other ways to make money from these hijacked buildings. We saw syndicates specifically from KZN moving up to Johannesburg, taking control of these buildings, extorting the people that were staying there, and then taking control of the buildings, in that they would then charge the rentals, etc. We also had a problem in the mid-90s to late 90s with what we call absentee landlords. We had a lot of building owners emigrate from South Africa. They weren't sure whether the new South Africa was going to be fit for them. They weren't sure about the changing dynamics that we saw in our inner cities. And they left South Africa and they abandoned these buildings. So there was nobody to really take care of these buildings, and these hijackers moved in without much pressure for them not to take control. In some instances, you had people who left South Africa or moved to other cities that gave control of their buildings to people, thinking that these people would run the buildings for them, and these people end up hijacking those buildings as well.
But why would the owner of a private security company be the target of what now appears to have been a hit, an assassination?
So again, I'm relying on information the same as you as it's coming out at the moment, and I don't have any inner knowledge of this particular investigation. But when we look at security companies at the moment, they're vying for this type of work. You'll see that security companies have changed their image over the years. They've now become a lot more militarized. You talk about MRBs, men in black, these big bulking guys using long guns, which we call rifles, or submachine guns, or AK-47s. The whole dynamic has changed, and these guys all want a piece of the pie. Crime is very lucrative in South Africa, and fighting crime or preventing crime has become an industry on its own. That's why the security industry is one of the biggest industries in South Africa, with hundreds of thousands of registered security officers. The problem we're seeing is that there's now fights between security companies, both registered and unregistered, who are vying for a piece of the cake and who are trying to take control of these buildings on behalf of the landlords, be they absentee or not, and they're undercutting one another. So from a security perspective, it's exceptionally, from a money perspective, it's an exceptionally lucrative industry to be in when it comes to building management, building security, and even evictions.
Chad Thomas, good to talk to you. Chad is the CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations.